hosting. And we got old Flash, Mr. Stephen Mosley in the house today, our board man. And we got David Jones in here, as always, filming. And today we're going to have as our topic parks. And the reason we're going to talk about the parks because there was so much written in the newspaper Sunday about parks. And I have information as being a former council member and understanding operations and visiting going to the different conferences where people talk about certain things that enhance cities and stuff. And you know, some of the sessions you go to, they talk about things like quality of life. And whenever they talk quality of life, one of the things that always comes up with quality of life is actually parks. Now, as a council member here in the city of Port Arthur, it's one thing that I noticed as I rode around the city. The parks were not maintained, and some of them were not in the state whereby people can go actually sit out in the park or take the kids out to the parks. And I got to thinking about, you know, why is this happening, and why we can't maintain the parks. Well, as a citizen, I probably would say, you know, that the city council is negligent in staying on top of the parks. But after understanding funding and how things are done in cities that are successful, then, you know, I got a better understanding of some of the things that created this type of environment, or this results of our parks being in the condition they are. And our topic today is going to be parks. And if you choose to call in, remember you're listening to The Breeze, KSAP 96.9 on the FM. And you could join into the discussion by simply calling 409-982-0247. And if you choose to do so, just remember the views and opinions expressed on this show are solely those of our studio guests, callers, and hosts, and does not necessarily reflect the views and opinion of this station or its management. So, when I got to trying to think about why we were like we were with the situation of our parks here in the city, there's one thing that I came to a conclusion was for a city our size to have 33 parks, that's a large number of parks if you have to maintain them. Well, why are the parks in these states, and why can't the grass be cut on a regular basis? Why can't the equipment be maintained so that it looks nice and that it's operable? Well, the reason being is the park program and maintenance of the park was set up for failure. And the reason I came to that conclusion was when I started checking into things, I found out that our park and recreation department was affected by the mass reduction in city employees prior to my coming on council. So basically what the decision was made was we're going to cut back employees, and that was a money saving or a cost saving move, which most cities are doing when the economy was not good, unemployment rate higher. But the fact is, when you reduce your number of employees in a department that is in charge or charged with maintaining the particular portion of the city or for which they are hired for, and that's parks in this case. Now you're looking at trying to maintain 33 parks, but you've reduced the number of employees significantly. Well, in my opinion, what we just did when we done that was we set our city up for failure in maintaining the parks for our citizens so which they could go and enjoy the parks. So actually, if we're going to reduce the number of employees, then somewhere in the planning, someone should have had a plan in which we were going to continue to provide the service that we were providing with the number of people we had. Or we have to find a way that we could continue to maintain that service. And the only way you could have done that is you had to, one, be prepared to have additional help during a certain portion of the season in which you know that you can actually maintain and provide that service that you provided when you had the regular and permanent workers. Or two, you have to contract it out. But what you cannot afford to do is not stay abreast of keeping up with the parks. Now, why is that so important in cities? The reason parks are so important within cities because that is a quality of life issue. There's not many services that we provide citizens that the citizens can go and enjoy and use for the purpose of enjoyment. You know, we provide water, sewage, you know, drainage and all that. But the fact is, that's not nothing you really want to enjoy. You can enjoy it. But parks is something that we can actually do whereby people can actually go out and enjoy themselves. So that's considered quality of life. And that is very important for all municipal governments in order to ensure that the citizens are happy and that you're doing something that affects the citizens' way of life other than providing a service that they depend on and is necessary for existence. But with the parks we have, 33 parks. And as I rode around the city, I found that we failed to use a plan when establishing parks here in the city of Port Arthur. And what I mean by that is, neighborhood parks are okay if you can maintain them and keep them in condition that people can go and enjoy them. But if you do not maintain or you can't keep them where people can enjoy themselves, then there's no need in having the park because all you're doing is creating dissension among the citizens because people who are not necessarily going to go to that park, but when they pass by the park in their neighborhood and they see the grass tall or they see equipment out there that is broken, then to them that is unsightly. It's better off, we're better off not having a park than to have a park like that. So what the city needed to do was take a look at how we can manage these parks and how we can provide a park that citizens can be proud to go to and sit around and watch or take their young kids to the park and let them play or citizens can go and walk. And when you talk about the park and recreation, you talk about plan. And then within your master plan, you have a plan that's 10 years out and is geared toward improving, maintaining city parks with the same principle as any other services we provide, but at the same token, in this particular case, you would want to try to get citizens' input and try to place things within the parks that citizens can enjoy or citizens can benefit from. So rather than have 33 parks and put them in all little neighborhoods, what the city should have done is take a look at strategically located parks within our city where people do not have to drive a substantially long distance to get to a park, but once they're at the park, it's manicured, the equipment for young kids are in operating order, nothing is broke, the grass is always cut, no trash out there. So you have to have people that maintain these parks on a daily basis, not a weekly basis, not every 2 weeks, but being able to maintain it on a daily basis. So what you have to do, you have to get your plan so that you can actually execute the plan. A plan that is not executed is really no plan. And a plan that is not specific and detailed on where you want to be at each point or each year, you can't measure how successful your plan is being executed. So what we have in the city is a master plan, which I've heard mentioned on numerous occasions. But when we talk about the master plan, what has been executed of the master plan? What portion of it, or what part of it? Where we stand? So those are questions that in order for us to better provide the citizens with the type of parks here in the city of Port Arthur that they expect and be able to maintain those, it's important that one, we seek the citizens' input, two, we develop a plan, and three, we execute that plan and execute it as written, with no excuse. Because the next portion of that plan that you're going to talk about that you come up with is you must be able to fund it. Now, I can write something on paper, but if I don't have the money, or I'm not willing to put the money into it, then more than likely I'm not going to execute that plan. And I think here we need to take a look at what we plan and what we want to do, and we need to take the approach that we have to, at all costs, fund these particular projects or stay within the plan, because it's credibility that the citizens want to have in their leaders. And in order, you must first of all ensure that whatever you say or you promise them that will happen. You know, we could say what we want to do, but until we actually do it, it's only a thought. And with that in mind, we're going to take a 1-minute break. And remember, you're listening to The Breeze, KSAP 96.9 on the FM. If you wish to call in and comment on parks, please feel free to do so at 409-982-0247. And we'll be back in 1 minute with It's Your City. Radio, KSAP 96.9, Harold Doucet with It's Your City. And our topic this morning is parks. And once again, if you care to join in on the discussion, please feel free to call in 409-982-0247. We left out talking about parks, and we were addressing the number of parks we have in the city. We're talking about, for those who just joining us, we're talking about the lack of maintenance of these particular parks and our neighborhood parks and all. And when you start talking about doing it and doing it to a plan, the plan must include how effectively can we get these parks. And we have neighborhood parks, and I think in order to be effective and be able to manage in this day and age, keeping in mind your resources. You have to consider your resources. And resources is the people. How many people we have to maintain these parks? How many people will we hire during the summer that we're going to fund to help maintain these parks? How many lawnmowers we have, weed eaters we have? We have to find out what our resources are in order to find out how many we can actually manage. And the reason I say that, prior to my getting on council, when I first returned here to Port Arthur in 2000, I lived on Lake Arthur Drive, and we have the park, Lucius Allen, behind us over by where Memorial High School is now located. And one day I decided to walk over to that park, and I walked down the streets and around, and when I got there and looked at the park, I was sort of disappointed because I had walked a considerable distance only to see what I thought was unexplainable, a large area with grass overgrown and fields not maintained and no one using it. Well, we have to take a look at how we do business. If we're going to dedicate that much area for parks, then we must be able to understand, we must maintain it, and it must be very attractive. As a council member, I know that we spend a lot of money in the Lucius Allen Park. And that park is like two-faced. When you look at the new softball fields that we had built, you see that they're nice softball fields, but right next to them and in the area you have other fields that are really half and half. You know that they're fields, but if you have to think about whether they're being used for actual competition or something, you have to question whether they're just practice. The grass not maintained that well, and the road there looked like it's a third world country road. So we have to understand that when we start talking about we're going to make a park a world class, or we're going to make it the park where we could bring competition here to the city to bring in revenue from hotels and restaurants and stuff, you have to put the emphasis on maintaining it and fixing it in a fashion that it looks like a complex. When we say Lucius Allen Sports Complex, you go over there and you have part of the complex new, and the other part is just there, like most of the other parks here in the city. We can't do that. We have to take pride in what we do, and we have to have a plan that when we execute it, the end result is something that our citizens are proud of what we've done here in our city. The citizens who have young kids are proud to take their kids to the park and let them run around and play on the different playscapes and have a good time. And the parent don't mind sitting and watching because the environment is conducive to the activities that's going on, playing and games and having fun, as opposed to watching that they don't run over in that area because the grass not cut, or wondering if a snake gonna come out the long grass over to where the kid is playing. So we cannot call a park if it's not a park. Rather than have neighborhood parks, we should have community parks. We should have them strategically located throughout the city where people do not have to drive long distances to get to a park. But for all those who pass by the park, whether they use the park or not, when they pass by it, they feel good about looking at the park. It's nice. It's taken care of. When they have relatives or friends visiting and they're driving and they pass by the park, they want the relatives or friends to say, "Oh, that's a nice park y'all have." But for most of the parks we have, I don't think you'll get that comment. Uh, what do we need to do? We need to, one, make sure that we have a person that's accountable for our parks program here in our city. And as a council member, we've made Park and Recreation Director a priority for the city manager, the new city manager coming on in the city over a year ago, to get a Park and Recreation Director for two reasons. One, Dr. Thigpen was doing HR and Park and Recreations. Prior to Mr. Robinson retiring from the city, Dr. Thigpen done only Park and Recreations. So to have an individual to do two jobs at one time, I think is asking too much, especially when Park and Recreation is very vital to the city. Now, if I were to ask myself as an elected official, which position do I hold more important, the human relations guy or the Park and Recreation Director, I would make sure that the Park and Recreation Director guy is the guy that I want on board first, because what he does, or what he's going to be entrusted to do, is going to impact significantly on the quality of life of all the citizens within our city. Our HR guy, he's going to deal with employees of the city. And I'm quite sure that there's few employees of the city as compared to citizens of Port Arthur. So it's making a decision on, do I want to support the larger population or the smaller? So your Park and Recreation Director is the key position. We still have not filled that position. And that's after funding this position for 2 consecutive budgets. We fund that position, and I was on council. One, when we first initiated the funding back into the budget to hire Park and Recreation, and this last budget, the position was once again refunded. So that position has not been filled. So as citizens, what you see in Park, you can expect that. You have not hired a person that's going to be held accountable to parks and parks only. You have an individual splitting duties to try to manage an important department within our city. So what you see is what you get. We don't have a director, so we have no way of staying on top of these parks on a daily basis. And when you start talking about the maintenance of parks, you know, maintenance of the park, you have to figure out what you're going to be doing during the year, and you have to request that funding within the budget. Now, there's a lot of things the city funds, but that is one area whereby we need to make sure that we put the proper funding in there, because, you know, it's quality of life. At some point in time, elected officials have to understand these tax dollars that you allocate and manage must always include something that can go directly to the citizen and the citizen can benefit from. They paying for it, so why can't they enjoy part of what they pay? And that's quality of life. We're not talking about what you have to give our citizens or what the citizens will receive. I'm talking about what you can do that let the citizens know your dollars are being managed well and you are being taken under consideration. So when you start talking about this article about the Port Arthur Council and the EDC at large over park spending, we should never have an article like that written. And we're going to talk about that article for the simple reason that all of the things I've mentioned earlier, you can go back. You don't have to worry about getting to this point on spending. Now, EDC, the Economic Development Corporation here in the city of Port Arthur, how do they fit in park and recreation? That is not their responsibility here in our city. The EDC is not responsible for park and recreation. But what the Economic Development Corporation has come up with is the fact that we have extra money in our reserves. The city parks look atrocious. So why don't we ask the citizens to allow us to take some of this 4A money and use to fix their parks and enhance the quality of life. So that's how EDC becomes involved with parks and recreation. They see a need, and without being asked, they go and submit to the council request to place it on a ballot so the citizens can vote to allow them to take some of the 4A money and apply it to parks to improve the quality of life. So that's how the EDC get involved. Now, they've done this before. They've made a habit of trying to come to the city and offer money for park and recreations. The problem we have that creates an article like this, where they at odds, is the fact that the council, when the money is voted on and approved by the citizens, the EDC have the money to disperse to the city to be used for parks and recreation. Well, what's happening over the years, the Economic Development Corporation has seen that we go to the city and request to give money for parks. But all the money we're giving is only being spent on certain parks. So that is what creates the odds over the spending. The EDC says we should be putting money into all the parks because all of the citizens voted for this. And on the other hand, they have observed over the years that once the money has been approved, that the request that the city were bringing to them was only involving certain parks. So in order to have the impact of that money felt by all our citizens in all the parks, the Economic Development Corporation decided to send to council a request for a park enhancement program. Now, basically what they wanted was to have council to allow citizens to come before them and request certain items for their particular park. Like somebody might want a gazebo. This park may want another playfield. This park may say we need benches or we need picnic tables. But it was a way to try to send the money into all of the parks that was voted on by all of the citizens. That was the request that the Economic Development Corporation made to the council. And they did that in the form of all requests that they make to council. And what citizens need to understand about the city and how the municipality government works is Economic Development Corporation can request. However, our council is the approving authority. So anything the Economic Development Corporation sends to council is in the form of a request, not a demand, but a request. All council has to do is entertain the request and either approve or reject the request. Now, with the park, the spending, if the Economic Development Corporation decided to ask citizens, allow us to give y'all more money to fix y'all parks. Y'all parks need to be fixed. Our elected officials ought to understand that we are blessed to have the additional monies now and additional funds. But what we are finding is that all of the money that the Economic Development Corporation asks council to spend on parks, what we are doing is we're putting that money into park and recreation, but we as a municipality must understand it's not the Economic Development Corporation responsibility to maintain and provide funding for these city parks. And therefore, instead of relying on the funds that the Economic Development Corporation is asking citizens to allow them to add, that should be enough money there partnered or added to the sum that the municipality fund for park and recreation to really have all our park enhanced and beautiful and maintained. But that was a breakdown. And the breakdown was simply when the EDC provided the funding was not being channeled through all the parks. So as you ride through the city, that's why you did not see our parks well manicured and maintained, and people were not able to get specific things within their community because, one, council was not funding them. Well, if you don't fund them, you can't do it. Two, the money that EDC was asking citizens to give so that they can help was being taken, but it was being channeled into only specific parks. So it was defeating the purpose. So that's why the Economic Development Corporation did what they normally do when they request you to allow them to give you money of your tax, give your tax dollars for your quality of life and enhance your parks. When they asked that, they were looking at all your parks. And when they see that the money is not being used in that fashion, and that's why they decided to want to be part of that, because they felt that because they putting out the money should be spent and channeled in the way in which they asked the voters to give it to them. And that's everybody benefited from the money. Not taking the money and benefiting only certain portion of the city or certain parts. So that is what created what they say odds between the Port Arthur Council and the EDC. It's really not odds. It's understanding the process. If you understand the process, then it's simple. It's not an odd. It's who's want to do what's in the best interest of the citizen and who won't. Who doesn't want to do it. And how do you come to that conclusion is by understanding how the system works. And that's all I'm trying to help today is provide the necessary background on how the system works within the municipal government so that you as citizens can determine what is best, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, what is right and what is wrong, and that you can understand why this article was written. And when they say at odds, you can understand why they're at odds. Now, the first thing that's important that you must know as citizens is that Economic Development Corporation is here to help our city and develop our city and citizens. The city council is here to help and develop our city. So you have two entities working with a common goal. So if two entities are working with the common goal, we should not have odds. So let's go back to the program that created this article, that park enhancement program that the city council sent. And if you read the article, within the article, the EDC CEO, Mr. Baptiste, goes through a considerable length to ensure that the citizens understand why the EDC proposed it and why the EDC feels so strongly about holding people accountable and ensuring that the money is spent the way the voters voted on it, and understanding why they asked the voters to vote on it. And in the article, you also have comments from Dr. Pigpen, who's right now the acting director for Park and Recreations, in which, you know, he says it all depends on how you want to use the word upgrade. And what I'm talking about is that we have and making it better. Well, everybody talking, but the real issue is that was a request made to council. That request was, we would like to have citizens come before the Economic Development Corporation Board and request certain things that are unique that they would like to see in their particular neighborhood park, and we would like to be able to provide up to $75,000 to that park to do what they're requesting. And that's all that the Economic Development Corporation sent to council. We want to distribute money. We would like to distribute it by having the people come to us, tell us what they want for their specific park, and we provide up $75,000. Now we know with that type of program, the money will now go to all the neighborhood parks. It won't be specifically geared toward this park or that park. It's going to go to all the parks, because people now have the right, or they have an access to go to and talk about what they need in their park. Now that was only a request. So the request was brought up before the Economic Development Corporation Board, and they agreed, approved, and sent the request to council. Now, that request is based on taking care of citizens, improving the parks, and bettering the quality of life. It goes to council. Council agrees. It's a good program. And if you review the tapes of that particular council meeting, you'll find out that of all the discussion that took place about that program that day, no one really was against the program. No one was against the program. So now you have a request by the Economic Development Corporation to enhance parks, but geared toward citizens' requests, and in all the parks. and you have the council saying, we don't see no problem with that. We don't see no reason why citizens can have input. So if you both agree, where did the odds come in? Where do we get to the point that someone says at odds for spending? Never was at odds with spending. The only reason the program was rejected by council, if you read the article, if you go back to the video and review the meeting itself, you will find out that the only reason that program was rejected, it was rejected because the certain council members, the mayor, Councilman Williamson, Councilman Thomas, Councilman Freeman, at the time, they said that the EDC had not met with the city park staff to discuss the list and had broken protocol by not doing so. I'm going to read that again. The city council rejected the plan. Some city officials, the article says city officials, not all. Some city officials said the EDC had not met with city park staff to discuss the list and had broken protocol by not doing so. After all, the city owns the park and has a master plan that outlines the direction the park projects are supposed to go. Read that part again too. After all, the city owns the park and has a master plan that outlines the direction park projects are supposed to go. Now, citizens, what you need to understand about that is, one, there's no protocol to be broken here. The city, there's nothing that requires Economic Development Corporation to discuss anything with city staff prior to sending a request to council. There's no protocol. Okay, we have a caller. Caller, you on?
Yes, sir. What you just said, on the radio, there's always obstacles in the way. See, now EDC agreed on it, but there's always something with the city council. You know, they're going to do what they want to do anyway. But every time you get word protocol, now, EDC agreed. Now, they say they hadn't got contact with him. I don't believe that. So, I mean, this is an ongoing problem going through these channels to these people. There's always obstacles in the way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, caller, and you're absolutely correct, and that's why I read both of these statements twice so that people can understand them. And I see you got on to the first one. There's no such thing as a protocol. What the Economic Development Corporation discusses, and whatever they approve, is only approved and discussed at their level. They have to then send it to council for council's approval. So when it went to council, if staff have any questions, they can then call the Economic Development and ask, or when the item comes before the council, it's open for discussions. All questions could be answered. So there's no protocol that should have been brought up in this discussion to reject this program. There's no such thing. That was only a request to council. All EDC said was, we would like to do this program so that we could gear this toward all these neighborhood parks and give the people out there an opportunity to come to us and say what they would like to see in their park. It was that simple. Council, all they had to do was do exactly as they did, accept or reject. But to use break protocol as an example, anyone who said that they thought they broke the protocol, they don't know how the municipal government works. There's no such thing as breaking it. It only went to them as a request. They all they had to do was just accept or reject. But to try to say they didn't talk to staff, the EDC does not have to talk to the staff for no items. They have a board, they discuss it, they approve it, then they send it to the council. Council then discuss it, approve it, or rejects it. But there ain't no protocol talking about you gotta discuss something with us before you do it. So citizens need to understand, do not believe that that is not part of our municipal government and the way we work. That's just personal agendas there. Now, it states, after all, the city owns the park and has a master plan. Well, yeah, the city owns the park. Well, if the city owns the park, why do they even have to need money from EDC in order to maintain their parks? The city owns all the parks. They can't maintain them. EDC goes to the citizens to ask them to allow them to help to put money into the parks. But now all of a sudden the city's saying, okay, we got the money, but we own the parks. Well, if you own the parks, why didn't you fund it? So we have to understand that don't be misled by statements made by individuals who's trying to say that something was done wrong. There's nothing done wrong. Everything is done right and according to the way our procedures and policies dictate. It just wasn't done to their fashion. Because if the EDC start entertaining requests for funding, that means that now the citizen will go before them. They will request. If they request, the board approves. If the board approves, it still has to go to council for council to approve. But no longer can someone take the money and put it where they want. That's the problem. That is the issue. So, the city master plan. Let's talk about the master plan. I know a little bit about that master plan because 2 years I was on council. When we were given the master plan, I took the time to thoroughly read that master plan. So I'm very aware of what it said. Now, that master plan is a 2-year plan. So if you got a 2-year plan, that means each year you got to add a year to your plan because a year of it is gone. Okay? Well, the first year I was on, I read the master plan. It says the number 1, 2, and 3, the top priorities were softball fields, soccer fields. That was the master plan. And while I was on council, I voted and got soccer fields. Then we also voted to put money in Lucius Adams to create these softball fields. So therefore, on this master plan, we've done softball fields and soccer. So that's in accordance with this master plan. And that was one of the reasons that I was pushing these issues. Now, the next year, when the master plan was brought to us and I looked at it, I suggested to Dr. Thigpen that he go back and redo the priorities because the priorities and the master plan was the same one that he gave me the year before. And I told him, we've done softball fields, we've done soccer fields, we need to bring the priority up to something that the citizen want. And at that time, most citizens was requesting walking paths throughout the city, so they don't have to walk in the street. And with discussions with him, he went back and amended that sheet for priorities, and he put walking paths as a priority. So now walking path is a priority. So this year, when we done the budget, we didn't fund no money for walking paths. So that tells me that the master plan for the city is only a master plan to meet a requirement. Are the staff changing it as they accomplish certain things on it? It was obvious to me it wasn't because, like I said, I noticed that well, I don't see any walking paths coming up in the city, nowhere, not one. But if walking paths was your priority, the way you do your master plan is you say we need to put walking paths within the city. This area here has no place where people can walk other than the street. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna pick this part and we're gonna do a walking path this year, and we'll do one in that part of the city this year. So it's two. Or we'll do one this year, one next year, one the year after. But eventually, you have walking paths throughout your city. That's a plan. But when you say our master plan and we got walking paths but no one fund, no one discuss, no one talk about it, there's no such thing as a master plan. And if the Economic Development Corporation Act citizens, for them to have the opportunity to provide funds to the park and recreations, then if you go to the master plan, that money should have been put forward toward walking paths, because that is what the number one priority. So citizens, when we talk about our park situation here in the city of Port Arthur, we must have a better understanding on how it works, and hopefully some of the information I pass on you today will enable you to have a better idea on how the municipal government works and how the park, along with all other services we provide you, are done by with your tax dollars. But this park and recreations article, where you see Port Arthur Council and Economic Development Corporation at odds over park spending, it shouldn't be. There's no reason for anyone to be at odds. The only reason that there was a rejection there was individuals decided that they didn't discuss it with us first. Well, when they brought the request to council to approve placing on the agenda, on the ballot, a proposition to allow them to ask the taxpayers to allow them to put money into park and recreations, why didn't council say they broke protocol? They did not break protocol then, so I don't see how they could have broken protocol now. With that in mind, this is your city, it's your parks, you're on. Where do we go from here? Harold Doucet, Steve, we're gonna have to go today. David, Papa Sunday Man also joined us through the discussion. But to all the citizens of Port Arthur, Texas, hope you have received some information that would help you in deciding what's going on in our parks. And if you have any questions, feel free to call me. And once again, you're listening to The Breeze, KSAP 96.9 FM on your dial, and have a wonderful week.